Hi guys! This week I thought I would continue with my Pantheistic Witchcraft series, which wasn't actually originally going to be a series. I was just planning on making one video about the subject, but then I rambled on for so long about one aspect of it that I thought, well, actually there's an awful lot more that I can say about this, so I thought that I would turn it into a sort of mini series. So in the last video I talked about the astral plane and lucid dreaming and stuff like that, and if you're interested you should check it out below. But essentially I was talking about how my experiences with lucid dreaming and indeed with things like trance work and stuff like that have sort of shifted my thinking when it comes to magic and magical practice and things of that nature. So it's essentially stuff like trance work is basically my magical practice at the moment. I have been incorporating, since I decided that I was going to actually have a magical practice in my spirituality, which is something that I haven't really done in the last couple of years as I've been creating my spirituality. Since I've decided that, I have been incorporating little bits and pieces, candle burning things and various different sort of magical techniques. But these are sort of like, well, obviously most people will tell you that those kind of things are props, and that the most important thing that you're tapping into is your own will and your intention and that kind of thing. An awful lot of people have that view on magical workings. But even more so for me, I feel like the central part of my magical practice all lies within the sort of, I'm never sure exactly what to call it, but trance work or astral travel or active imagination, however you want to call it. So what I'm primarily going to be talking about in this video is meditation and the role that meditation has to play when it comes to trance work and active imagination and all that kind of thing, and why meditation was important for me in developing a magical practice, why it's central to my magical practice and indeed to my spiritual practice. I have written about meditation quite a lot on the blog, but I actually don't think I've made any videos specifically about meditation here on the YouTube channel. I know I talked about it a fair bit in my video on my daily practice, because meditation has indeed become my primary daily spiritual practice. But I actually haven't talked a huge amount about meditation here on the channel, so this is an opportunity to do so as well. But if you're interested in knowing more about about my meditation practice and the development of it, or my thoughts on it and so forth, then I'll link the tag so that you can go to the blog and have a look at all the different blog posts that I've written on meditation to date. So first of all, I'm going to talk a little bit about my definitions, because it can get a little bit confusing. I tend to use different words when it comes to talking about trance work. Essentially, when I kind of use various different words slightly loosely and interchangeably. So there are so many different ways that you can talk about this kind of work. You can refer to it as trance work, active imagination, which is a Jungian term primarily. It's a Jungian method. So that's kind of more on the psychological kind of end of things. Astral travel, path working, and there are all these different kind of there's all this different kind of terminology for various different things, that kind of journey work that you can do. Essentially, I understand it all to be the same thing. I definitely can see how the different words have slightly different connotations. For example, path working for me would be something that has a particular goal in mind. You've got a particular place that you're going, or something that you want to do, or you've got a particular place that you're starting from. So you might do a path working with a tarot card, for example, or I often use path working as part of my magical practice. I'll talk about that again in a minute. Whereas often in ritual I will do what I would consider to be active imagination or astral travel. I tend to use them interchangeably. And that will be more kind of free flowing. That will just be whatever comes up, whatever kind of happens, I will just go with, and there isn't any particular goal in mind. It'll just unfold, and I allow it to unfold without sort of trying to make it go one way or another, if you see what I mean. But essentially when it comes down to it, I understand all of these to be the same thing. And I have talked about this a little bit on, well, to some extent, to a large extent, on in the video about lucid dreaming and the astral realm. So I would suggest that you watch that before you watch this video, because it'll probably clarify things for you a bit. So trance work, or journeying into the dream world, whatever you want to call it, that would be my primary magical tool. But I would say that the catalyst for me developing this practice, and indeed the catalyst for a lot of the changes that have come about in my spiritual practice and the deepening of my spiritual practice, has been meditation. And I really feel that meditation is key for this whole thing. If I hadn't developed a meditation practice, I wouldn't be where I am today, and I actually probably wouldn't even have got to a point where I felt like I wanted to develop any sort of magical practice at all. So I talked in the blog quite a lot about other reasons for meditation, why it's important and that kind of thing. I have also actually talked about meditation a little bit in my video on awareness. I've forgotten about that. I knew there was another video where I talked a bit about meditation. So meditation it has so many different functions, it has so many different benefits. It's wonderful for stress relief, it's wonderful for just any sort of physiological issues that you're having. Try out meditation, it might help. It's wonderful for enhancing your dreams, I have found, and things like that. It has just improved my mental and emotional state immensely. I feel it makes me happier probably because I'm more relaxed. It can help you be more creative, it can help you sleep better, and there are all these myriad reasons why you would want to meditate, and that's not even touching on the spiritual reasons, which of course there are many also. So a lot of people meditate because they want to kind of increase their concentration skills, because they want to be able to focus better in ritual. Even if meditation isn't really seen as a kind of spiritual practice in and of itself. A lot of the time people seem to have this attitude that it's kind of like practicing. But I definitely don't see it that way anymore. At first I used to, but I definitely don't see it that way anymore. Meditation has absolutely become a practice in and of itself, because to some extent for me, meditation is, in some ways it's the opposite to astral travel, or all those other words that you can use to describe what I mean when I say astral travel. In some ways it's the opposite, because meditation is about not allowing the mind to wander. Well, it's about drawing the mind back again and again. It's about focusing on the breath and being aware and in the moment, and yeah, about letting your thoughts arise and just letting them go and returning to the breath. Whereas anything like active imagination and such and so forth is much more about going with wherever your mind goes. But in another way, they are actually kind of the same thing, because what you're aiming to do is to teeter on that brink between consciousness and unconsciousness. You're searching for the dream state, in my personal opinion, or particularly the lucid dream state, which I feel to be on that sort of same level of kind of hovering between the realms, or hovering between states. Because in meditation, what you are generally aiming to do is to kind of slip into almost like a dreamless sleep kind of state, but you are aware. And then when you're doing trance work and those kind of things, you're following the conscious mind, but you're allowing yourself to slip into it. You're allowing yourself to go into this trance state. You're following it. And rather than sort of going off on a little ego-driven worrying about a certain situation or trying to figure something out, you are really engaging with the material that comes up, and you're going deeper and deeper to the point where you are you're receiving images from the unconscious. That's what you're kind of aiming for. You're not aiming to be sitting there just following any little thought that pops into your head in terms of, you know, what am I going to have for dinner tonight, or what are my plans for the weekend, or worrying about something that's going to happen in work tomorrow. What you're aiming to do with things like active imagination and trance work is to wait until an image arises, and you will kind of know that image, you'll feel that image, because it's not something to do with the sort of, you know, the chatter of your ego. It's something that's kind of coming up from the unconscious, and you kind of follow that, you go down into the rabbit hole. So as far as I can tell, meditation and astral travel and those kind of things are they're actually doing a very similar thing when it comes to my spiritual practice, but I do kind of hold them quite separate, because obviously what you're actually doing with your mind is completely different. So essentially, meditation is important to me because it involves that same kind of state, and when I'm in that state, I feel as though I'm experiencing the greatest amount of connectivity that I can, because I've loosened the grip of the ego on my mind. I'm allowing myself to experience the all, essentially, and because I'm not bogged down in feeling like, oh, this is me and this is, you know, the line between me and everything else. And you're loosening that line, you're allowing yourself to reach inwards into the depths of yourself and also reach outwards into the world and just kind of become pure consciousness, pure existence, this pure moment of awareness within the all. And essentially when I'm doing trance work, all I'm doing is allowing myself to be in that state and then allowing images to arise at the same time. So meditation has been very important for me in being able to do trance work in the first place. And I suppose you can probably see how that works, because if you're trying to achieve a certain state of being between consciousness and unconsciousness, if you're already doing that in meditation and developing a discipline in meditation, it's going to be much easier for you to slip into that state when you're doing trance work and to actually go deep into the unconscious, rather than just sitting there and nothing's happening, or feeling that the images that are arising, that you're not really going very deep with them, or that they're not arising from a deep place. I feel that meditation opens up specific neural pathways that just allow us to let go of the conscious mind and the ego chatter and really let your heart speak, really let the unconscious speak. So yeah, developing a regular meditation practice was actually really important for me in moving on to the next level, I suppose, with my spiritual practice. And I wasn't even aware of what direction it would go, what direction it would take when I started my meditation practice. I just knew that it was something that was good for me to do. So ever since I came back to my spiritual practice a couple of years ago, I have actually always done some form of active imagination kind of stuff. Well, I pretty much always have as part of my spiritual practice. But I felt that once I started my meditation practice, something I wasn't expecting was that my experiences on the astral suddenly became much more vivid, and they called to me much more. And it was at that point that I actually met the Morrigan. I hadn't really met her properly up to that point. And I started to have much more vivid experiences on the astral. I suppose I started to actually travel in a way that I probably hadn't before. I was only really dusting the tip of the iceberg before that point. And now with a regular meditation practice, I started to sort of drift down a little bit more. And I feel like I've got a long way to go. I definitely want to be able to get to a point, and I mentioned this in the previous video, of being able to go into a full trance, into a state almost identical to, say, lucid dreaming. But that's probably a fairly long way off for me. So yeah, meditation has so many different purposes, so many different benefits. It is a spiritual practice in and of itself. It is probably the simplest way for me to feel my connection with the divine all. But it also kind of keeps my spiritual mind active and my magical mind active, because while I started off doing active imagination as sort of inner work, or as just sort of for its own sake as a spiritual practice in and of itself, that is the way that my magical practice has sort of naturally evolved. And that probably makes sense, because active imagination had become so central to my spiritual practice and to my ritual experience that it makes sense that once I started to feel that maybe some sort of magical practice was going to happen for me, that it would arise out of that kind of astral journeying on the astral plane. So, in what way has my astral travel turned into a magical working? I feel like there is a very fine line, and I feel like part of it is just interpretation. You could look at the kind of astral travel work that I was doing before and say it's magic or it's not magic or whatever, and there hasn't been a major departure from the kind of experiences that I have or what I do with that so far. But I am starting to look at it as a magical practice, because I'm starting to incorporate specific goals, or I'm just starting to call it a magical practice on occasion. I still am very definitely doing astral travel for its own sake, but then when I decide that I want to do a magical working, essentially there are various different ways that my trance work can go when I decide that I'm going to use it as part of a magical working. Either it will be a sort of path working where I will have decided beforehand exactly what I want to do, what I want to experience, what parts of myself I want to access maybe when I go into that kind of realm of the unconscious. I might decide images that I want to bring up and things like that, because I've decided what I want to affect in myself, what changes I want to make in myself, and I might have ideas about how best to achieve that in the kind of symbolic language that the unconscious best understands. Because this is how I understand inner work and inner change to work best, is that if you can tap into the unconscious, get to that point of being between the conscious mind and the unconscious mind, and encourage the right symbols, the right imagery to arise, so that the unconscious kind of gets it and goes, ah, yeah, this is what we're doing now. So very literal kind of imagery like shedding a skin, that kind of thing, can be really, really powerful and can really step up your inner change to another level. So that is maybe one of the primary ways that I have been using trance work and astral travel for magical purposes, and that is something that I actually had done before, and I just called it ritual. So you can see how really there is quite a blurry line, but I've been allowing myself, now that I'm calling it magic, I've been allowing myself to sort of maybe set up a couple of things on the altar, and light candles, and maybe write something down and seal it in something, burn specific incense, or there's various kind of actions that I can take, which I feel are going to majorly, they kind of make it more concrete. It's like you go into the unconscious, you're like, yeah, this is what we're going to do, and then once you act it out in the physical realm, you're sort of backing up that intent. You're kind of making it clear that yes, on all levels, this is the change that I want to make. So I do actually use meditation in this as well, not just astral travel. I've actually found that the way that it's worked for me is that obviously meditation is like a daily practice for me, and it's a method for keeping my mind kind of working in the way that I want it to work. It is, like I said, a spiritual practice in and of itself, and I do it every day, at least once a day. But I actually have started as well to use meditation to set up sacred space, which is an interesting one for me, because I haven't cast a circle now in years. Not since I was a teenager. Once I came back to paganism and to my spirituality, casting a circle just never made any sense for me. I kind of called the watchtowers in various different guises for a while and stuff like that, but really properly actually casting a circle or thinking of it as a circle is not something that has resonated with me at all in recent years. And for a while there, I was really moving away from actually doing anything in particular to open sacred space at all, apart from, it was more like speaking words of devotion to the images of the divine that most speak to me, and that was sort of my opening of sacred space. But I've been finding it very powerful to use meditation, just kind of pure meditation, as a way of creating sacred space. And this is something that I will do to set things up before I then go into astral travel or into the path working that I'm going to be doing. It's a really wonderful way of getting yourself into the right kind of mindset. And this is something that I used to do as well. I used to kind of meditate for 10, 15 minutes or whatever, however long I felt. And then often you will just kind of organically slip into that astral travel kind of realm, because your mind will something will drift up, and you can either decide to let it go again or to follow it. So I've been using my prayer beads to do that. Actually, I've been meditating with the prayer beads and using that as a way to sort of I'm putting myself into the right state of mind, but also at the same time creating this sacred space, because I suppose because sacred space for me is primarily in my mind, but also once my mind is in that state, I feel that I am changing the space around me, because I myself am changed. So yeah, I suppose there's this kind of very loose definition between astral travel and meditation for me. They kind of slip into one another, and they very definitely need each other to survive, and they're both kind of central to my magical practice, the way that it is at the moment. One last thing that I want to talk about is the question of what magic can actually do and how much it can actually affect the outside world. I can't exactly remember how much I talked about this in the previous video. I definitely touched on it because I was talking about how the dream state that there's this feeling that you can reach out and kind of touch the web, and I was kind of musing on whether or not this means you can actually shake the web or not. So the jury is very definitely still out for me on this. I definitely have never come to any conclusive answers as to whether or not magic in the way that most people understand it is actually possible. I have tended to think that it isn't. I have tended to take this kind of psychological model, and that's not to say that some of the things that people have said have worked, they haven't worked, because I'm a big believer in the butterfly effect, and that idea of if you just change one thing within your own mind, that's going to have a ripple effect. And that if you change your mentality, you change something deep enough within you, then you're going to be behaving differently, you're going to change your environment, you're going to change the people around you, and that can just kind of ripple outwards. That makes perfect sense to me, and I think that there is an awful lot more you can do with that than people might think. That the mind is a much more powerful tool than people might understand. And I think one of the reasons why I'm so interested in dreaming and in meditation and in those kind of mind states is that I feel like you're tapping into the greater potential of your mind, because of course our conscious minds, or as far as we're aware, actually in general, we don't use large portions of our mind. I think that's still, now that might be changing, I think that is gradually changing over time, that we're understanding more and more how the different parts of our mind function. But there's definitely these amazing capabilities that humans have, that we generally just don't tap into, or can't tap into them all in a lifetime. There are all these different neural pathways that can be developed and that can be just kind of left to rot. And I feel like when we're in that kind of dream state, when we're in that kind of meditative state, we're between the worlds, I feel like we have greater access to all of the capabilities of our mind, that we allow our mind to do all the work that it can actually do. And I think there's a lot more to that than people with naturalistic views will sometimes assume. But of course then, as I mentioned before in the previous video, as a pantheist, everything is connected. So where do you kind of draw the line? Where do you draw the line between saying, oh, this is just inner change, this is just changing myself, and this is external change, this is changing the world? Because it's all the same, it's all the same thing, and it can be kind of difficult for me to even make that distinction. So for me, yes, magic is inner work. Magic is affecting change in the self. It's affecting change deep down, that I'm working with the unconscious, I'm working with the entirety of myself and the entirety of my mind. That's what I'm aiming for, and to utilize my entire capacity as a human. But of course, once that ripple effect starts, and once I've tapped into that web, once I've achieved that state of feeling connected to the all, where does that end exactly, you know? How far can those ripples really go? I don't know. I don't have an answer for that. But I think that this is an interesting way that even naturalistic pantheists could absolutely understand magic to be part of their worldview. I don't think that it's contradictory, that it needs to be contradictory at all, because if you are a monist or a pantheist, if you believe in this underlying connection between everything, it stands to reason that there is nothing in particular holding us back from connecting to everything else and putting change out there into the world. So I think I'm going to leave it there for today. I'm writing a blog post on the same topic on my blog, and in that blog I'm also going to talk a little bit about ways that you might use meditation to do these kind of things, or to sort of move in the direction that I have moved in, or to develop develop the right kind of state of mind for you to tap into the web and to achieve that feeling of connectivity, and maybe move towards a sort of lucid dreaming kind of state. Because there are a couple of different meditation techniques that I have focused on and off in the last couple of months that have allowed me to really yeah, to really tap into those kind of ideas. So yeah, there'll be a bit more about that on the blog. I'll leave it there for the moment. If you liked this video, then don't forget to subscribe. And you can also subscribe to my free newsletter, which I am going to be sending every week from now on, with my blog post of the week and the video of the week. And then once a month on the dark moon, I send exclusive content. I send an exclusive article on your heart story and tapping into your heart story. So if you're interested in that, then do join the newsletter too. I'd love to see you there. Okay guys, take care, and I'll talk to you again soon.